Hello and welcome. My name is Hannah Hess and I'm here to talk to you today about my 15 demands of education. This is kind of like a personal narrative for me, and as I was creating this, I feel like it pretty closely aligns with my teaching philosophy as well, so it's just kind of a blend of a few different things. So for an introduction of this project, it's based off of Gholdy Muhammad's Cultivating Genius book. And this project includes 15 statements that I believe that we must demand from education, schooling, and teachers. So the first one is relationships. And this is kind of a topic that has like an umbrella effect of a few other topics I'll talk about later. But I do believe that relationships is one of the most important things in the classroom. It's vital for teachers to develop personal and authentic relationships with their students. Hence, the personal and authentic. I think that's so important. But this idea is kind of one of three ideas that I'll talk about here in just a second, but it's based off of this article. You can kind of see this graph here, but it's kind of this cycle that you can create. You support students through relationships, value them through reading, and then agency through writing. It's this article. I'll show you very quickly. It's an article, it's called Giving Voice to Valeria's Story. It's an article that kind of focuses on English language learners, but it's a really great article and I got a lot of information out of it. But this chart is farther down here and it goes into much more detail of the ideas that I'm about to explain to you. But I just wanted to touch on that as well. So relationships. Relationships are so important. The second one is relevant reading, so that's also kind of within this little cycle. But all students need reading materials that are relevant to them. They need texts that they can relate to and see themselves in. I actually just watched a TED Talk yesterday about windows and mirrors and books, and the speaker was just saying how mirrors are ways that students can create self-worth, and windows are ways that they can begin to understand empathy for other people and especially their peers. So diversity in children's books is a huge issue that I love to advocate for, but it's so important for students to have windows and mirrors in books, a relevant, not like books that are like 100 years old. Sometimes those are kind of outdated and aren't sensitive to a lot of topics, but anyways, in short, relevant reading is very, very important. And then the third topic in this kind of little cycle is choice in writing. So students need choice in writing to be able to express themselves. This gives them a chance to share their experiences or feelings, and then when students share their writing, the relationship strengthens and the cycle begins again. So that is a very tip of the iceberg of basically one of the things that this article talks about. But hopefully that gives you an insight for how that cycle starts and then starts over again. But writing, choice in writing specifically, writing of course is very important for our ELA and growth for students, but choice in writing so they can have a chance to express their experiences and their feelings, and then of course this is a way that you get to know your students better, so choice in writing is very important. Okay, this is a topic that I've kind of recently touched on, but integrating emotional and mental health awareness and positivity into the curriculum. Students, I think this is in here somewhere, but students spend so much time at school. It's like, why are we not talking about this more? Of course, I'm in elementary education, so high school teachers may be talking about this more, but it starts at such a young age, and I've seen it myself firsthand, so I just think it's so important. But I got this idea because I recently did a mini action research project, and my research question was, how can we integrate emotional and mental health awareness and positivity into the curriculum as teachers to enhance student learning? So I'm not saying completely set aside the curriculum and focus on this, but how can we integrate this into the curriculum so students can have that knowledge and that awareness of these things? And then, of course, like, I believe this is the link to my research project. Yes, it is. So that's what it's based off of. And then I just wanted to briefly mention this quote. This is what I was saying a second ago. Children spend more time in school than any other formal institution structure. As such, schools play a key part in children's development, from peer relationships and social interactions to academic attainment and cognitive progress, emotional control and behavioral expectations, and physical and moral development. All of these are reciprocally affected by mental health. Teachers also need to realize that mental health and emotional health go deeper than the surface. Universal promotion of mental health programs often focuses on constructs such as social and emotional skills, positive behavior, social inclusion, effective problem solving, and good citizenry. So these things affect much more than just what meets the eye, like what's on the surface. They go much deeper than that. And emotional and mental health, not only awareness, but positivity from our teachers is very, very important. Okay, number 5, positive teacher attitudes. So kind of, bridging the gap from the last one. Along with awareness, we also need positivity, and that comes from positive teacher attitudes. So, more effective instruction, positive teacher attitudes towards, this article is about ELLs, but nonetheless, and high expectations from all students that they can succeed in engaging school climates can foster all students' motivation to learn and commitment to their educational success in the elementary school years and beyond. This starts at the elementary school years, which is why I think it's so important. So, like I kind of said here, although this article is discussing English language learners, I think this applies to all students. All teachers should have positive attitudes towards their career, as well as high expectations that all students succeed. I think that having high expectations for all of your students goes hand in hand with positive teacher attitudes. If you don't have high expectations for your students, then that's a negative outlook on your students. That's a negative attitude, and that affects them. You may not think so as the teacher, but they know what what you say about them, and your attitude affects, especially at the elementary and the younger ages, it affects how they think of themselves. So it's very, very important. And then I'll just briefly show this. But this was the article. It's called Educating English Language Learners. It's a wonderful article, but it's where I pulled this quote from. Okay, number 6. Inclusion and equity. This is very important. Inclusion is access to high-quality education. Inclusion is equitable education. This was a quote that I had kind of pinned up with my big teaching philosophy that I've kind of been putting together. But this is from this article. I'll just show you really quick. Honoring and building on the rich literacy practices of young bilingual and multilingual learners. So again, my focus is English language learners, so a lot of these quotes come from that, but I really think that these are practices that apply to all students. So we need to give all students what they need, not treat them as equals. All students should have access to high quality education. So you may have seen this cartoon before. I've seen it 100 times and I love it, and there's many variations of this, but I kind of like this one just for the purpose of this explanation. But you can see in the left picture is treating students as equals, and then the right picture is giving students equity, or giving them what they need. And that is very important for all students. We have to give them what they need, not treat them as equals. Okay, number 7 begins one of the 4 points I have centered around the LACE framework. I recently this semester discovered the LACE framework, and I just heavily identify with it. Like, I love it. I love everything that it stands for. Hence, this one's about love, but I do really love everything that this one stands for. And I think it just encompasses so many important things in a very short and explicit way. So the first one is love, of course. So one of the most important things that teachers need to implement in their teaching is love. And I mean authentic love, like love your job, love to be there, and love the students. Love in so many ways. The LACE framework defines this as leading with kindness and reacting with patience. So I feel like love kind of gets thrown around a lot, especially like, as teachers, like love them first. It can kind of just get thrown around a lot, and it's like, okay, what does that mean though? Does that just mean being nice to them every day, But I really like the way that they define this, and it is leading with kindness and reacting with patience. And that is a great definition of love. And if we strive for that as teachers, then we will definitely be trying to love our students. Okay, number 8, authenticity. I love this word. I just love this word. One of my favorite sayings is authenticity is magic, because it is. Being authentically yourself, especially as a teacher, goes such a long way for so many reasons. Students see when you're being authentic. They may not tell you or express that to you, but students know and can see when you're being authentic. And we should want our students to be authentic to us, like be authentically themselves, and I'll touch on that later. But anyways, for the purpose of this slide, we need teachers who are authentic in the classroom. We need teachers who are authentically themselves and transparent with their students while still being professional. I mean, I don't mean by authentic, talk to your students like you would talk to your friends per se, but it's important for teachers to be themselves and be, in a way, transparent with their students so they can talk to them on a personal level, because I just really don't like when teachers, especially elementary teachers, treat their students as kids that don't really understand what they're saying, and they have to talk to them in this special voice because they don't understand what's going on, and they don't have that much knowledge yet, so we need to talk to them in this special way. But that's not being authentic. That's not being authentically yourself and talking to your students. Our students, however young that they may be, are also still humans, and it's important for us to be authentic with our students in the ways that we interact and converse with them. So, leading back to one of my former points, so we can build authentic relationships with them. That's why it's so important. I just feel like some teachers aren't authentic with their students and just kind of put on this fake teacher front in the ways that they teach and interact with their students, and that's not what fosters relationships with your students, and that's not really what puts on a positive attitude, and many other things that leads to. All that to say, this may be one of my favorite points, but it is so important to be authentic as a teacher with your students, as a person in general, but especially as a teacher. And I have linked this video here. We don't have to watch it, even though it's just a few minutes long. But this is a short video by...
Who teaches?
Oh, no, I can't remember his name. But it's We Teach Who We Are. And he makes just some really good points of why it's important to be yourself as a teacher, and how that affects your students, how that affects your teaching, and then how that affects their learning. So anyways, this really matches the point that I was trying to make here, so I won't play it, but that's linked here as well. Okay, the third one is courage, and I don't think a lot of people would say that it takes courage to teach, but it does, and the people who don't say that don't know. And I'm not saying that in a harsh way, they just really don't understand what it's like, because it does take courage to teach. At any grade level, at any subject, it takes courage to teach. My mother was a special education teacher for a long time, and that takes a certain amount of courage to be able to do that as well. Just like it does for elementary teachers, just like it does for middle school, high school, etc. It does take courage to teach. And we need teachers who have courage to move forward in the face of fear. Because although many people may not want to admit it, there are things that bring about fear in the world of teaching. But link another video here, and let's say his name. Now I can't remember his name. But this is another video
Courage to Teach is
by the same guy, and it is the fear and courage in teaching. So he does a really good job of explaining what is fear and what is courage in teaching, and why does it take courage to teach. So another very short video, but very important to relate to this point. Number 10 is empathy. We need teachers who are empathetic to all students. You may not be able to understand exactly what each of your students is going through, but you can listen to them and be empathetic. Why would a student want to learn from you if they don't think you care about what they're going through, good or bad? And I feel like when I initially say empathy, we immediately think of bad or hard circumstances that students are going through, but that's not always the case. Some students may not have a hard life. They may have a functional home life with parents that love them. Like, they may not have anything rough going on per se, but they want to know that you still care about them. Like, they want to know that you're interested in what's going on in their life. Maybe it's just they play soccer after school and they're really excited about their game coming up, and they just want you to talk to them, build that relationship for them, be excited for them, like, be empathetic. Like, try to feel what that student or that person is going through. So the LACE framework defines empathy as holding space for others, and I really like that. So empathy is so important, and of course that just goes back to my first point that I made that kind of is under the umbrella of building relationships with your students. Okay, number 11, dialogic teaching. This is kind of a weird one, I know, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how important it is. So when students participate in class discussions, they are much more engaged in what they're learning. It's vital to have classroom discussions frequently and daily. They become much less engaged when the teacher is just at the front of the room talking for long periods of time. I mean, who wants to sit and listen to that? Because I know I don't, so why would your students, you know? Classroom discussions allow students an opportunity to take control of their own learning, as well as voice their own opinions. When there's a discussion going on, it makes the classroom environment so much more comfortable for students to be willing to ask questions. If you're having that open discussion about learning anyways, then they're much more willing to ask questions than they would be if you talk for an hour straight and then at the end you're like, does anyone have any questions? You know what I mean? So I just think that's really important, and if nothing else, it contributes to their learning when they're able to talk about something and explain something to you and ask questions. Then that only enhances their learning experience and the amount of knowledge that is being transferred to them. So this idea is based on a research paper I did for another class, which is called Effective Comprehension Strategies for Elementary Education. So dialogic teaching was one of like the 11 suggestions I made for effective comprehension strategies. So if nothing else, dialogic teaching so heavily affects comprehension, but it goes again back to my first point, and that is how important it is to help foster those relationships with your students. If you're having a conversation with them that leads to learning, that is definitely going to build the relationship versus you just up front talking all day. Number 12, encouraging students to be themselves and allow opportunities for them to express themselves. Super important, very important. This is important for many reasons. If students feel like they can be themselves and express themselves, then they are more willing to be engaged and learn. If they feel like their personalities and interests are being suppressed, they will have built up emotions and be much less engaged. This idea also contributes to the importance of a healthy and positive classroom environment. So a lot of these ideas that I've mentioned definitely contribute to a positive and healthy classroom environment, and this one does too. You should allow students opportunities to express themselves and be themselves. Writing is one way, as I kind of mentioned earlier, but there's many ways. So I just think it's a really important thing to incorporate in your classroom and your teaching and be mindful of as you are kind of constructing your classroom environment, especially at the beginning of the year. But just think of ways that you can allow your students to be themselves and express themselves. I feel like my personal favorite is presenting, or even like group presentations if some students don't like to present by themselves. But presenting something that they created was just such a great opportunity for them to just talk to me and talk to the class without having to write or read anything that they had written. It was just a way for them to get up and explain, this is what I did, and then the other peers can talk about it and respond to them. And that's a way for them to be able to be themselves in the classroom and be comfortable. So it goes into a lot of things. I could talk about this one for a while, but this one's also very, very important. Okay, number 13. This was kind of a weird one, but it's so important. Integrating technology. I know that sounds weird, but hopefully our pandemic that we have recently been through has shown the importance of technology in the classroom. But just a quick touch on this article, this research article, why use technology in the classroom. It creates a more engaged environment. Students love using technology. They use it at home, and if they don't use it at home, they're even more excited to use it at school. It incorporates different learning styles. There are many, many ways, I could talk about this for a while, but there's many ways that you can use technology to differentiate your instruction. It's very helpful. It improves collaboration. There's a lot of wonderful tools. The G Suite tools are a great example, but there's so many ways that students can collaborate virtually through technology. It prepares children for the future. Whenever they get to have most jobs that they will be looking at in their future will require some sort of technology skills, even if it's basic, but they'll probably require some sort of technology skills, so it only helps prepare them for their future. And then connects you with your students, which of course is always important. So I could talk about this one for a while because I've had lots of technology experience myself and have firsthand seen the connection that it makes in the classroom with those students and the importance that it holds, but I'll just stop there. Oh, and this is based off of this article. I'll just kind of briefly show it. The top 5 benefits of technology in your classroom. Okay, number 14, proper teacher training. After I mentioned all of these things, I realized that it's really hard for teachers to be experts on all of these things that I just mentioned. It's nearly impossible, but at least it's very difficult. So there was a lot of important demands that I just listed. All teachers can't be experts on everything, therefore it's vital that schools provide their teachers with adequate training on all of these topics. Curriculum takes a back seat when it comes to these ideas, and that's not at all to belittle course content, because the curriculum we teach is how knowledge gets transferred, which leads to many other important things. However, it becomes much more difficult to teach the curriculum if these ideas are not in place. That being said, it's difficult for teachers to embed all of these ideas without the proper training. So, that kind of summed up everything that I wanted to say, so I don't want to repeat myself, but all of that to say, if teachers want to achieve all of these important ideas that I just listed, it's important to have the proper teacher training in the first place. And again, this is based off, I already showed this video, we teach who we are, but something in here, when I mentioned that curriculum takes a back seat to these ideas, that's not to belittle course content. Something very similar is said in this video, so that's why I linked it here. And number 15, we're finally to the end of all of these demands that I have, and I thought the best one to save for last would be a pay raise. So I started to do a bunch of research on why it's so important for teachers to get a pay raise, but I thought, I don't think I need to do that. I think after you just listen to everything that I just discussed, that's important to incorporate in the classroom, qualities to have as a teacher, and the relationships to build with your students, I would like to hope that gives you an idea of why it's so important to advocate for teachers to get a pay raise, because they definitely need one. Don't you think? So hopefully all of these ideas have highlighted the importance of that. So that was all of my 15 demands. I feel like, so, like, I don't know what the word I'm thinking is, just so, like, well, I guess demanding, calling them demands, but it's in a softer way. I feel like it's just important ideas that I feel like should and truly must be incorporated in the classroom for a healthy and positive and successful classroom environment with students who are willing to learn. So just a few afterthoughts on all of that. Many of these ideas contribute to what a healthy and positive classroom environment should consist of. I pretty much just said that. The classroom environment is the vibe of the classroom, and it's very important for how children learn. It may seem weird for me to say that. You may not know exactly what I'm talking about if you've never been in a classroom before, but if you spend about 10 to 15 minutes in any classroom, you may not register it in your brain, but you can indirectly pick up on what kind of vibe is going on in that classroom. That comes from the vibe that the teacher set, and it also comes from the vibe of how the students are reacting and behaving based on the teacher. So it's that's kind of a rabbit trail I could go down, but it's very important. These ideas contribute to what type of classroom environment, and that's very important for how your students learn. So just wanted to say that. And all of these ideas support the idea that children come first and curriculum and assessments come second. And I almost feel like a bad guy saying that, but I shouldn't, because it's what's right and it's what's important. These methods should be implemented in the classroom before successful learning can take place. And that's why I don't feel bad about saying that, because these methods should be implemented in the classroom before successful learning can take place. That's why they should come first. In one of the two videos of that guy, now I can't remember his name, but in one of those two videos, he basically talks about how that's why curriculum, kind of the same thing I said here, that's why curriculum and assessment should come second, because they need relationships with you to be able to learn from you successfully. Okay, on to the next. Finally, all of these ideas are immensely important in their own ways. I thought about at the end kind of highlighting my most important one, or even a few important ones, but I think each of these are individually important in their own ways. The LACE framework is a good starting point. If you see all these and you're like, I don't know where to start, I think the LACE framework is a good starting point. But a lot of these ideas really center around the relationships that you have with your students and the methods of your teaching. However, there's also ideas that we should demand from the people responsible. Our schools, politicians, superintendents, I don't know exactly. Not sure who can be held responsible for some of these things, and I'm sure some of them just depend on the school. Such as proper teacher training, including things like mental health training, not just curriculum content training, pay raises, and more funding for technology, funding for relevant reading materials, etc. So there's some things that require action, and I'm sure each of these actions lead to a different person, but it's also important that we advocate for changes that need to be made, not just in our classrooms and not just in our schools, but in our, I want to say worldwide, but our worldwide education. You know, it goes much more beyond our classroom, but it starts first in our classroom. Okay, that's all I have. I know that was a lot, but I think all of those ideas were really important, and I don't want to waste any more time and repeat something that I've already said. But hopefully you just got a glimpse of each of those ideas and understand the value and the importance of each of those individual ideas and how they contribute to successful student learning, because that's what it's really all about. Okay, Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Bye.